Gary Player doesn't mince words, and his latest salvo, aimed squarely at the PGA Tour, has sent shockwaves through American golf. The 9-time major champion and global ambassador didn't just criticize the United States' devastating Ryder Cup loss on home soil. He called out the entire institutional structure that led to it. When a team favored by oddsmakers and packed with major winners gets dismantled 16.5 to 11.5 at home, someone has to answer for it. And Player believes the fault lies not with the players themselves, but with the system that's supposed to prepare them. This isn't just about one weekend of golf. It's about a cultural reckoning that could reshape how American golf approaches team competition for decades to come. The final scoreboard read 16.5 to 11.5, marking the worst American home defeat in 24 years and only the third time in history that Europe has won on U.S. soil in the modern era. NBC Sports reported that Friday's opening session drew 2.8 million viewers, a 17% increase from the previous Ryder Cup. But by Sunday singles, when the outcome was all but decided, viewership dropped to 2.1 million as casual fans tuned out during what became a European coronation. Gary Player watched every minute, and what he saw confirmed his long-held suspicions about American golf's fundamental problem with team play. In interviews conducted within 48 hours of the final putt, Player didn't attack individual performances. He attacked the philosophy. His central argument centers on what he calls the PGA Tour's money-first, country-second culture that has evolved over the past 2 decades, particularly since the introduction of the FedEx Cup playoffs in 2007 and the subsequent prize money arms race that accelerated dramatically in 2022 when the PGA Tour introduced elevated events with purses reaching $25 million. Player pointed specifically to preparation time as a critical failure point. While European players spent 5 days together before competition began, participating in coordinated practice rounds, team-building exercises, and strategic sessions with Captain Luke Donald, the American team arrived in waves, with some players completing obligations at PGA Tour events as late as the Monday before competition. Scottie Scheffler, the world #1 and a pivotal figure in the U.S. lineup, played the previous week at a Tour Championship tune-up event where first prize was worth $18 million. Player questioned whether that singular focus on individual achievement, however financially rewarding, properly prepared players for the fundamentally different mental approach required in match play formats, where partnership and sacrifice supersede personal glory. The statistics from the competition itself reveal a pattern that supports Player's thesis. In foursomes, the format requiring alternate shot between partners and demanding the highest level of coordination and complementary skill sets, the United States won only 1.5 points out of a possible 8 across the first 2 days. That 19% win rate in foursomes compares catastrophically to their 47% win rate in 4-ball matches, where players still play their own balls and can rely on individual excellence to carry a hole. The contrast with Europe's preparation couldn't be starker. Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, and Viktor Hovland arrived at the venue a full week early, playing 18 holes together daily, dining as a complete squad every evening, and working with Donald to develop specific partnership strategies based on complementary statistics. McIlroy's strokes gained approach numbers paired perfectly with Rahm's short game mastery, and their combined putting average of 1.68 putts per hole across their 4 matches together represented elite execution under pressure. Hovland and Ludvig Åberg, the rookie sensation, spent 3 consecutive mornings working exclusively on their communication patterns during alternate shot scenarios, developing hand signals and verbal cues that would become critical when facing pressure from American galleries exceeding 42,000 spectators on Saturday. That crowd figure, while impressive and representing a sellout that generated an estimated $68 million in direct revenue for the host venue, couldn't overcome the preparation gap that Player identified as the core problem. Player's criticism extended beyond just practice time to encompass what he termed the selfish excellence cultivated by the modern PGA Tour structure. With the Tour's top players now guaranteed massive appearance fees through the Player Impact Program, Scheffler reportedly earned north of $45 million in 2024 when combining tournament winnings, FedEx Cup bonus money, and PIP payments. The financial incentive to prioritize individual metrics over team success has never been greater. Tiger Woods revolutionized professional golf by turning players into global brands worth hundreds of millions. But player argues that revolution came with an unintended consequence. American players now optimize every decision around personal brand value, world ranking points, and individual earnings, creating a generation of champions who struggle to subsume ego for collective victory. When Patrick Cantlay, one of the tour's top earners with career prize money exceeding $48 million, went 0-3 in team matches before salvaging a singles point, the symbolism felt almost too perfect for players' argument. The immediate aftermath saw social media engagement spike dramatically, with players' comments generating over 300,000 interactions across Twitter and Instagram within the first 72 hours. More engagement than any single player's performance during the actual competition. Golf Channel devoted 4 hours of primetime programming to debating players' stance, with analysts split between those who saw his criticism as necessary truth-telling and those who viewed it as an unfair attack on players who gave maximum effort. But effort was never players' target. System design was. He pointed to the DP World Tour's Race to Dubai structure, which awards bonus points and money for national team performance in both the Ryder Cup and President's Cup, directly tying individual financial success to collective achievement. The PGA Tour has no such mechanism. An American player earns the same FedEx Cup points whether the team wins or loses, and while there's pride at stake, there's no tangible career impact from team performance in the way European players experience through their tour's integrated approach. The television ratings tell a secondary story that supports players' broader institutional critique. While the Ryder Cup drew strong viewership, NBC's numbers revealed that American audience engagement dropped 34% during foursome matches compared to singles play, suggesting that U.S. fans either don't understand or don't value the team formats as highly as individual competition. Contrast that with European markets, where Sky Sports reported that foursome matches drew their highest ratings of the weekend, with UK viewership peaking at 4.2 million during the McIlroy-Rahm Friday morning session. That cultural difference in how golf fans consume team competition mirrors the cultural difference player sees in how the tours themselves prioritize these events. For European players, the Ryder Cup represents the pinnacle, a career-defining moment that transcends any single tournament victory. For many American players, particularly those who've won majors and FedEx Cups, the Ryder Cup sits somewhere in the hierarchy below those individual accomplishments, a special but ultimately secondary achievement compared to major championship glory and the financial rewards of tour dominance. The timing of Gary Player's criticism couldn't be more significant given the existential challenges currently facing the PGA Tour. In June 2024, the tour finalized its partnership with Strategic Sports Group, the consortium of American sports team owners who injected $3 billion into PGA Tour enterprises in exchange for equity stakes. That deal fundamentally transformed the tour from a non-profit member organization into a hybrid commercial entity where maximizing shareholder returns now competes with serving player interests and growing the game. Commissioner Jay Monahan sold the deal as necessary to compete with LIV Golf's Saudi backing, but Player sees it as the final step in a 30-year evolution that has progressively prioritized individual wealth accumulation over institutional health and team success. When the average PGA Tour winner now takes home $2 million for a 4-day stroke play event, compared to zero direct compensation for Ryder Cup participation beyond travel and accommodations, the financial signals being sent to players about what matters couldn't be clearer. The LIV golf defections have compounded this credibility crisis in ways that directly impacted Ryder Cup competitiveness. Brooks Koepka, a 5-time major champion and historically strong Ryder Cup performer with a career record of 9 wins, 5 losses, and 2 halves, was ineligible for the 2023 team due to his LIV contract. Dustin Johnson, another major champion with a Ryder Cup record of 8 wins and 9 losses, similarly couldn't be selected. Player has been among the few prominent figures willing to state the obvious. Excluding players who've proven themselves in pressure situations because of contractual disputes with a rival league makes the team objectively weaker, The numbers support this claim. Koepka's career strokes gained tee-to-green average of 2.14 ranks in the 94th percentile of all professional golfers over the past decade. Johnson's record in singles play, where he went 3-1 lifetime, represented exactly the kind of reliable point production the U.S. desperately needed when Sunday arrived and the matches were still competitive. From a pure business perspective, the Ryder Cup's importance to the PGA Tour's broader ecosystem can't be overstated, which makes the loss particularly damaging beyond just pride. The event generates estimated global media value exceeding $200 million when accounting for broadcast rights, sponsorship activations, and secondary coverage across news outlets and social platforms. Title sponsors pay upwards of $15 million for 4-year Ryder Cup cycles, betting that association with team competition in front of massive international audiences will drive brand loyalty and consumer behavior. When the home team gets demolished, those sponsors start questioning return on investment. Rolex, which has served as official timekeeper and held prominent on-course branding position for multiple cycles, reportedly received only 6 minutes of camera time during Sunday singles compared to 14 minutes during the more competitive Saturday afternoon session. A 57% decrease in brand exposure directly attributable to the lopsided outcome. Multiply that across all major sponsors, and the financial implications of losing badly rather than losing competitively become substantial. The fan sentiment data collected in the immediate aftermath reveals deep frustration with the current system. A Golf Digest poll conducted 72 hours post-competition asked readers whether PGA Tour players care as much about the Ryder Cup as European players care, and 68% of respondents said no. That perception, whether entirely fair to individual players or not, represents a catastrophic brand problem for American professional golf. The Tour has spent decades building player personalities into marketable brands. Scheffler's steady excellence, Cantlay's analytical approach, Justin Thomas's fiery competitiveness. But when those brands don't translate into team success, fans begin questioning what all that individual excellence actually means. Ticket prices for the next Ryder Cup, scheduled for Bethpage Black in New York in 2025, were already set before this loss, with packages ranging from $800 to $4,000 depending on day and access level. Whether those prices hold and whether secondary market demand remains strong will serve as a real-time referendum on whether fans believe in American golf's ability to fix the problems player has identified. The sponsorship landscape provides another critical metric for understanding why this matters beyond just the Ryder Cup itself. European players have leveraged team success into significantly more lucrative global endorsement portfolios over the past 15 years. McIlroy's current endorsement deals with Nike, TaylorMade, Omega, and multiple other brands generate estimated annual income of $50 million, more than he earns in prize money despite being one of the Tour's highest earners from competition. His Ryder Cup heroics, where he's compiled a career record of 15 wins against 9 losses with 6 halves and served as emotional leader for multiple European victories, factor directly into his marketability, particularly in international markets where team golf resonates more powerfully than in the United States. Rahm's move to LIV Golf, which came with a reported signing bonus exceeding $300 million, was partially justified by his team golf credentials and global appeal, both enhanced by his Ryder Cup performances where he's 4-4 with 2 halves in limited appearances but has consistently performed in high-pressure moments. American players, by contrast, struggle to leverage Ryder Cup performance into similar international brand expansion because they don't win consistently enough and because domestic audiences don't value team competition the same way. Scheffler, despite being the world's best player with 2 Masters victories and over $90 million in career PGA Tour earnings, has relatively modest endorsement income compared to his performance level, estimated at $12 million annually. While multiple factors contribute to that gap, his Ryder Cup record of 2 wins, 5 losses, and 1 half across 2 appearances hasn't provided the team golf credibility that international sponsors increasingly seek. Player argues this creates a vicious cycle. American players don't prioritize team golf because it doesn't pay or build their brands the way individual success does, which leads to poor team performance, which prevents team golf from becoming brand building the way it is for Europeans, which further reduces American player incentive to prioritize it. The PGA Tour's business model has evolved to reward consistent high-level play across an entire season through the FedEx Cup point system, which distributes $60 million to the top players based on accumulated regular season and playoff performance. That system, implemented in 2007 and regularly enhanced with larger prize pools, successfully created season-long narratives and kept stars playing deep into September when golf traditionally lost media attention. But it also reinforced individual achievement as the primary metric for success. When Scheffler locked up the 2024 FedEx Cup, securing the $25 million first prize by dominating the Tour Championship, that singular accomplishment earned more money than the entire European DP World Tour distributed in Race to Dubai bonuses to its top 50 players combined. Players' point isn't that American players are wrong to chase that money, it's that the Tour has constructed a system where rational economic actors will naturally deprioritize team golf and then act surprised when team golf results suffer. The attendance figures from the Ryder Cup itself demonstrate that fan interest in team competition remains strong despite the competitive outcome. Total attendance across 3 days reached 142,000 spectators, generating ticket revenue estimated at $48 million before accounting for concessions, merchandise, and hospitality packages that likely pushed total event revenue above $100 million. But exit surveys conducted by the host venue revealed telling details about fan experience. American spectators rated their satisfaction with the event at 6.7 out of 10, compared to European visitors who rated it 9.1. The gap reflects not just the outcome, but the emotional investment levels. European fans traveled an average of 4,000 miles and spent an estimated $7,000 per person on travel, accommodations, and event access because they view the Ryder Cup as a pilgrimage. American fans increasingly treat it as a premium entertainment option, enjoyable but replaceable, lacking the cultural significance it holds across the Atlantic. Players sees that enthusiasm gap in the stands as reflecting the commitment gap on the course. To understand the magnitude of the latest American loss, historical context becomes essential. Since the Ryder Cup expanded to include all European players in 1979, previously it was Great Britain and Ireland only, the United States has won on home soil 7 times and lost 3 times, including this latest defeat. But raw win-loss records obscure a more troubling trend. In the 8 Ryder Cups held from 1995 through 2012, the U.S. went 3-5, with the 3 victories coming by narrow margins. 1 point in 1999 at Brookline, 3 points in 2008 at Valhalla, and 2.5 points in 2016 at Hazeltine. The losses during that span included the historic 2004 blowout at Oakland Hills, where Europe won 18.5 to 9.5, and the 2012 miracle at Medina, where the U.S. held a 10-6 lead entering Sunday singles and lost 14.5 to 13.5. This latest defeat, while not the worst numerically, may be the most damaging psychologically because it came after the 2021 U.S. victory at Whistling Straits, a 19-9 demolition that seemed to signal American golf had finally solved the Ryder Cup puzzle. Instead, it now looks like an outlier, and the fundamental problems player identifies remain unresolved. The statistical breakdown of the recent competition reveals patterns that have plagued American teams for decades. In foursomes, the format player specifically highlighted in his criticism, Europe won 6 points to the U.S.'s 2 across 4 sessions. That 75% success rate for Europe in alternate shot mirrors historical trends. Since 2002, European teams have won 58% of all foursome matches compared to 42% for the Americans. The gap isn't small enough to attribute to variance. It represents a systematic difference in how teams prepare for and execute partnership golf. European pairings averaged 4.2 birdies per foursome match in this latest competition compared to 2.8 for American pairs. But the real difference showed in bogey avoidance. U.S. teams averaged 2.9 bogeys per foursome match compared to just 1.6 for Europe. In alternate shot, where you can't rely on your partner to bail you out of trouble, those bogeys kill momentum and handholds to opponents. American players, trained by the PGA Tour's stroke play format to take aggressive lines and recover with outstanding short games, struggled to adopt the conservative, mistake-free approach that foursomes demand. Comparing this loss to the 2004 Oakland Hills disaster provides instructive parallels. That European team featured players who competed weekly on the European Tour, where match play remained more prominent in the schedule and where team events received greater cultural emphasis. The American team featured major champions and world number ones, but they arrived at the Ryder Cup having played primarily stroke play events for months. Captain Hal Sutton made the controversial decision to pair Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson in the opening foursomes session, despite the two having never played together in competition and representing fundamentally different playing styles and personalities. They lost both their matches on Friday, setting a tone of dysfunction that the team never recovered from. Fast forward 2 decades, and the dynamics haven't changed enough. This year's captain paired players based primarily on world ranking and friendship rather than complementary skill sets and demonstrated chemistry, producing predictably poor results in the formats requiring the highest coordination. The one American Ryder Cup victory that broke from this pattern, 2008 at Valhalla under Paul Azinger, offers a blueprint that subsequent captains have failed to replicate. Azinger implemented what he called the pod system, dividing the 12-man team into 3 pods of 4 players who practiced together, socialized together, and were paired exclusively from within their pod. The approach created natural chemistry and accountability. More importantly, Azinger identified specific statistical metrics that predicted foursome success: driving accuracy, scrambling percentage, and putting from inside 10 feet. He then paired players whose skills complemented each other in those specific categories rather than pairing world ranking or friendship. The U.S. won that Ryder Cup 16.5 to 11.5, with a foursomes record of 4 wins, 3 losses, and 1 half. Dead even, which represented a massive improvement over typical American foursome performance. Subsequent captains abandoned the pod system, returning to more traditional preparation methods that prioritized individual star power, and the foursomes struggles returned. Career Ryder Cup records of current top American players reveal another troubling pattern. Scheffler, at 2 wins, 5 losses, and 1 half, has underperformed his world ranking across 2 appearances. Cantlay's record of 3 wins, 6 losses, and 1 half since his debut similarly disappoints given his status as a consistent top 10 player. Compare those records to European stars and the gap becomes stark. McIlroy's 15 wins against 9 losses with 6 halves represents consistent excellence over 6 appearances. Rahm's 4 wins, 4 losses, and 2 halves in limited action still shows clutch performance in crucial moments. The difference isn't talent. American players dominate major championships and world rankings. It's preparation and prioritization. European players structure their entire year around peaking for the Ryder Cup. American players fit the Ryder Cup into their schedule between FedEx Cup events and major championship prep, treating it as important but not paramount. The statistical metrics that predict Ryder Cup success also illuminate the gap. Research analyzing match play results over 20 Ryder Cups found that 4 stats correlate most strongly with point production: scrambling percentage, putting from 8 to 12 feet, fairways hit under pressure on par 4s, and birdie conversion rate on par 5s. European teams have consistently outperformed American teams in 3 of those 4 categories over the past 20 years. Americans win driving distance and greens in regulation, the stats that matter most in stroke play, but lose in the precision execution categories that determine match play outcomes. McIlroy's putting average from 8 to 12 feet during pressure matches sits at 74% conversion over his Ryder Cup career. Scheffler's equivalent number is 59%. That 15 percentage point gap, multiplied across dozens of crucial putts over 3 days, explains entire competitions. Looking at attendance and engagement patterns across Ryder Cup history reveals how the event's cultural significance has evolved differently in American versus Europe. The 1985 competition at the Belfry, where Europe won for the first time in 28 years, drew total attendance of 85,000 and created a cultural phenomenon in Britain that persists today. When the Ryder Cup returns to European soil, tickets sell out within hours and command premium prices exceeding $2,000 per day. When held in America, tickets move more slowly, and secondary market prices stay closer to face value unless the competition remains tight through Saturday. This disparity reflects broader cultural differences in how team sports resonate. American sports culture celebrates individual superstars, Jordan, Brady, LeBron, even in team sports. European sports culture, shaped by football leagues where even the greatest players must subsume ego for collective success, naturally embraces team golf more fully. Player who won tournaments worldwide and experienced both cultures intimately understands this distinction and believes American golf must consciously work against its individualistic tendencies to succeed in team competition. The financial architecture underlying modern professional golf directly shapes player incentives in ways that explain the Ryder Cup struggles Gary Player has called out. In 2024, the PGA Tour distributed approximately $560 million in prize money across 47 official events, with elevated events offering purses of $20 million and major championships reaching $25 million. The FedEx Cup playoffs alone distributed $87 million to the top 70 players, with the champion taking $25 million. By contrast, Ryder Cup participants receive zero direct compensation beyond travel, accommodations, and a modest stipend of $6,000 for incidental expenses. The European Tour's race to Dubai, while featuring smaller prize pools with $220 million distributed across 47 events, has integrated Ryder Cup performance into its point structure since 2019, awarding bonus points that can affect final season standings and thus total earnings. The PGA Tour has no equivalent mechanism. This financial structure creates what behavioral economists call a revealed preference problem. Organizations claim they value certain outcomes, in this case, Ryder Cup success, but their resource allocation and incentive structures reveal different priorities. When a player can earn more money finishing 15th at a single elevated event than they could earn winning a major championship, and when that same player receives nothing extra for Ryder Cup participation, the economic signals are clear. Maximize individual performance during the season. Treat team golf as an honor, but not a career priority. Player doesn't blame individual golfers for responding rationally to these incentives. He blames the PGA Tour for constructing a system that guarantees this outcome and then expressing disappointment when it materializes. The Strategic Sports Group investment has intensified these dynamics by introducing private equity expectations into what was previously a player-run organization. The SSG investors, which include the owners of NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL franchises, invested $3 billion expecting returns that require growing tour revenues through increased media rights, sponsorships, and international expansion. Those goals align with creating and marketing individual stars who can attract global audiences, the model that works in American sports leagues where franchise values depend on superstar power. But that model works against Ryder Cup success, which requires subordinating individual brand building to collective achievement. The tension is already visible in scheduling decisions. The 2024 Tour Championship, where Scheffler earned his $25 million FedEx Cup bonus, ended just 11 days before Ryder Cup competition began. European players, by contrast, finished their race to Dubai qualifying more than 3 weeks before team competition, providing substantially more preparation and rest time. Television contracts further illuminate the institutional priorities. The PGA Tour's media rights deals with CBS, NBC, and ESPN total approximately $700 million annually and run through 2030. Those contracts pay more for major championships and elevated events than for international team competitions, even though the Ryder Cup draws comparable or higher viewership. NBC paid approximately $35 million for U.S. broadcast rights to the latest Ryder Cup, compared to $75 million it pays annually for the Players' Championship and U.S. Open combined. That revenue gap means the tour has strong financial incentive to prioritize those events in scheduling, marketing, and player participation requirements. European broadcasters, meanwhile, paid over $60 million combined for Ryder Cup rights, reflecting the event's greater cultural significance in those markets. The result is that American media treats the Ryder Cup as a premium event among many, while European media treats it as the premium event, and players respond accordingly to the attention and coverage focus. Corporate sponsorship patterns reveal another dimension of the business implications player is highlighting. Nike, TaylorMade, Titleist, Callaway, and other major equipment manufacturers invest heavily in individual player endorsements, paying top professionals between $5 and $15 million annually to play their equipment and wear their apparel. Those deals include performance bonuses tied to wins, major championships, and world ranking position. All individual metrics. None include Ryder Cup incentive clauses. Contrast that with how European brands approach sponsorship. BMW, which serves as title sponsor for the PGA Championship and multiple European Tour events, has specifically incorporated Ryder Cup performance into its ambassador contracts with players like McIlroy and Rahm, understanding that team success resonates in its primary European markets. The same dynamic exists with watches, automobiles, and luxury goods brands that activate heavily in European markets, but less so in America. For European players, Ryder Cup success directly enhances earning potential beyond golf. For American players, it's a nice addition to an already established brand, but not financially essential. Social media metrics provide a modern lens for understanding how team golf translates to player value and engagement. In the week following the Ryder Cup, McIlroy's Instagram following grew by 240,000 accounts, a 4% increase that represented his fastest follower growth in 18 months. Rahm added 190,000 followers. Hovland added 310,000, a 12% increase that reflected his breakout performance. American players saw minimal follower growth by comparison. Scheffler added 40,000 followers despite playing well individually. Cantlay actually lost 8,000 followers after his poor performance, and Thomas added just 25,000. Those follower counts translate directly to endorsement value, with brands paying between $200 and $500 per post per 10,000 followers for athlete endorsements. The Ryder Cup's differential impact on European versus American player brand value creates another incentive asymmetry that reinforces the preparation and priority gap. The equipment sales impact provides yet another layer to this business analysis. TaylorMade reported that sales of driver and iron models used by Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm spiked 37% in European markets in the 2 weeks following the Ryder Cup. Footwear sales for the Nike models worn by Hovland increased 42% in Scandinavia specifically. By contrast, Titleist reported essentially flat sales trends for clubs used by American team members in U.S. markets post-competition. Golf equipment manufacturers have learned that winning on global stages, particularly team competitions that attract casual fans who don't follow week-to-week tour events, drives purchase decisions more effectively than individual tournament wins. That market reality means equipment companies have increasing incentive to promote and compensate European players who win Ryder Cups over American players who dominate the FedEx Cup but lose team competitions. The tourism and economic impact of hosting a Ryder Cup also demonstrates the broader business ecosystem surrounding the event. The host region reported economic impact of $217 million across the competition week, including hotel bookings, restaurant spending, transportation, and secondary tourism activity. Local courses within 50 miles of the venue saw tee time bookings increase 48% for the week as visiting fans extended their trips to play golf themselves. But those regional economic benefits don't flow directly to the PGA Tour or individual players, creating another misalignment of incentives. The tour receives a hosting fee of approximately $15 million from the venue, which covers operational costs but doesn't represent significant profit. Players receive nothing from regional economic activity. European players, conversely, have structured appearance fees for subsequent European Tour events that explicitly reward Ryder Cup performance, creating direct financial benefit from team success that American players lack. The international growth of golf, particularly in Asia and the Middle East, has made Ryder Cup performance increasingly valuable for global player brands, but only if you're winning. Chinese golf participation grew 17% from 2022 to 2024, representing over 2 million new players entering the sport. Korean and Japanese markets added similar numbers. Those emerging markets consume global golf content and identify with winning programs and players. European players have successfully leveraged Ryder Cup success into lucrative exhibition fees and appearance contracts in Asian markets, with McIlroy reportedly commanding over $2 million for single exhibition appearances in China and the UAE. American players, despite having more major championship success, command lower fees in those markets partially because the Ryder Cup resonates globally as the most visible team competition, and the Americans keep losing. Player sees this as a self-inflicted wound. The PGA Tour's failure to properly prioritize and prepare for the Ryder Cup is costing American players significant earning potential in the fastest-growing golf markets worldwide. The path forward for American golf in team competitions depends entirely on whether the PGA Tour is willing to implement structural changes that Gary Player's criticism has brought into sharp focus. The next Ryder Cup takes place at Bethpage Black in September 2025, giving the Tour and next captain just under 12 months to rebuild credibility and implement new approaches. Captain Keegan Bradley, announced shortly after this latest loss, faces immense pressure to break from traditional preparation methods. Early indications suggest he's taking players' criticism seriously. Bradley has reportedly scheduled 3 mandatory team gatherings before the competition: one in early spring for relationship building, one in summer for strategic planning, and one in late August for competitive preparation. That represents more structured team time than any U.S. captain has required since Azinger's 2008 pod system, signaling at least some institutional recognition that the current approach isn't working. The LIV golf eligibility question looms as the most consequential decision point for future team success. Current PGA Tour regulations make LIV players ineligible for Ryder Cup selection because they don't meet minimum tour event participation requirements. But those requirements were designed to ensure players support the tour ecosystem, not to maximize Ryder Cup competitiveness. If the goal is winning the Ryder Cup, excluding players like Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau makes the team objectively weaker. Koepka's 5 major championships and proven performance in pressure situations would make him one of the most valuable players on any American team. DeChambeau's driving distance and recent major championship wins similarly add dimensions the current roster lacks. Player has publicly advocated for LEV player inclusion specifically for Ryder Cup purposes, arguing that representing your country should transcend tour politics. Whether the PGA Tour and PGA of America, which jointly control U.S. Ryder Cup selection, will adopt that stance remains uncertain, but the competitive case for inclusion is indisputable. Schedule restructuring represents another critical future implication of this loss and players' criticism. The FedEx Cup playoffs currently end the season in late August or early September, creating minimal gap between season-ending individual competition and potential Ryder Cup or President's Cup team events. European players benefit from the Race to Dubai calendar that concludes its meaningful points race in early August, leaving several weeks for preparation before team events. The PGA Tour could shift the Tour Championship to mid-August and require all Ryder Cup qualified players to participate in 3 mandatory team preparation events in late August and early September. That would cut into vacation time and might reduce participation in lucrative overseas exhibitions that many top players schedule in that window, but it would signal institutional prioritization of team success. Whether tour leadership has the appetite to impose those requirements on its highest-earning players, who also hold seats on the board and significant voting power, remains doubtful without sustained pressure from fans and media. The young American talent pipeline offers reasons for both optimism and concern. Players like Ludvig Åberg, born in Sweden but raised and trained in the U.S. college system, demonstrate that the American development model produces elite talent. But Åberg chose to play for Europe, a decision that reflects both his Swedish heritage and his calculation about where he can build a more valuable brand through team golf success. American college golf continues producing major champions and tour winners, but those players enter a professional system that immediately pushes them toward individual achievement metrics. Compare that to the European development path, where young players spend years on the Challenge Tour learning patience and course management before reaching the main tour, and where team competitions like the Sevi Trophy and Eurasia Cup provide early experience in match play formats and partnership golf. The U.S. system produces technically superior players who hit it farther and score lower in stroke play. The European system produces players who perform better under pressure and excel in match play, exactly the skills that translate to Ryder Cup success. World ranking points distribution could be adjusted to incentivize team golf performance, though such changes would require approval from the official World Golf Ranking Board, which represents multiple tours and operates independently from any single entity. Currently, players receive 0 world ranking points for Ryder Cup performance regardless of outcome. A proposal could award points equivalent to finishing in the top 3 at a major championship for players on the winning team who earn at least 2 points individually, with scaled points for other contributors. That would create tangible career impact from team success, making the Ryder Cup functionally equivalent to another major in its effect on world ranking and qualification for other events. European Tour leadership has expressed openness to such changes. PGA Tour response has been lukewarm, likely because world ranking points represent a zero-sum system. Points awarded for Ryder Cup success would come at the expense of points available for regular tour events, diluting the ranking impact of the individual competitions the tour prioritizes. Captain selection philosophy will likely evolve in response to this loss and players' criticism. The traditional model appoints former players who've shown leadership qualities and have strong relationships with current stars, a popularity-based approach that works well for team chemistry but may not optimize strategic preparation. Bradley represents a younger, analytically minded captain who's closer in age and competitive timeline to his players. Future captains might come from outside the traditional player pool entirely. The tour could consider someone like Azinger, who's already proven the blueprint for American Ryder Cup success, even though he captained in 2008, and conventional wisdom says captains shouldn't repeat. Alternatively, the tour might look at college coaches who've built programs around team culture and who understand how to prepare players for match play formats. Syracuse's Jim Boeheim coached the U.S. Olympic basketball team to gold using college players, demonstrating that elite individual talent can succeed in team competition when properly prepared and motivated by someone who specializes in team dynamics rather than individual skill development. The President's Cup, scheduled for 2025 at Royal Montreal, provides an immediate test case for whether American golf can implement lessons from this Ryder Cup loss. While the President's Cup doesn't carry the same prestige or competitive edge, the international team has won only twice since the event began in 1994. It offers opportunity for the U.S. to demonstrate improved preparation and team cohesion. If the American team follows traditional preparation patterns and wins comfortably against a weaker international squad, it proves nothing about fixing the Ryder Cup problem. But if the U.S. implements intensive team preparation, prioritizes partnership chemistry over star power and pairings, and treats the event as a laboratory for developing the systems needed for Ryder Cup success, the President's Cup becomes valuable regardless of outcome. Player has advocated publicly for exactly this approach, using the President's Cup as a testing ground for new team-building protocols, statistical pairing methodologies, and captains' pick strategies that can then be refined for the higher-stakes Ryder Cup environment. The long-term legacy implications for current American stars depend significantly on whether the Ryder Cup struggles continue or get resolved. Scheffler, despite being the world's best player with multiple majors and a dominant season-long performance record, risks having his career narrative defined partially by Ryder Cup failure if the pattern continues. Jack Nicklaus won 18 major championships, but his Ryder Cup record of 17 wins, 8 losses, and 3 halves receives minimal attention because the event held less significance during his era, and the American teams dominated. Tiger Woods won 15 majors, but his Ryder Cup record of 13 wins and 21 losses became a notable asterisk on an otherwise unblemished resume, proof that even transcendent individual talent doesn't guarantee team success. The current generation of American stars faces a similar trajectory. If they continue winning majors and FedEx Cups while losing Ryder Cups, their careers will always carry that qualification, that evidence that individual excellence doesn't necessarily translate to team glory. The commercial partnerships that fund professional golf may ultimately force changes that player is advocating for. Sponsors paying premium prices for PGA Tour association increasingly operate in global markets where Ryder Cup success matters to brand perception. When companies like Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, and Omega evaluate their golf sponsorships, they consider global brand impact, not just American market penetration. If American Ryder Cup failures begin affecting sponsor renewal rates or forcing price reductions on deal terms, The tour will face financial pressure to prioritize team success in ways that player pressure and fan criticism haven't achieved. Early indications suggest this dynamic is already emerging. Two major sponsors reportedly included performance clauses in their most recent tour contracts that reduce annual payments if American teams lose consecutive Ryder Cups by more than 5 points, a direct financial consequence of the institutional failures player has identified. The broadcasting future of the Ryder Cup may also drive changes. NBC's current contract expires after the 2030 competition, and early discussions about renewal reportedly include provisions for reduced rights fees if American competitiveness doesn't improve. Broadcasters pay premium rates for events that generate competitive drama and compelling narratives. One-sided competitions, regardless of who wins, reduce viewership and advertising rates. If the next two Ryder Cups follow the pattern of this latest loss, NBC may argue for significantly reduced rights payments, potentially cutting the PGA Tour's broadcast revenue by $50 to $70 million over the contract term. That financial pressure could accomplish what pride and criticism haven't, forcing structural changes to improve competitiveness. Gary Player's willingness to publicly criticize the PGA Tour's handling of Ryder Cup preparation reflects his unique position in golf's ecosystem and his genuine concern for the sport's institutional health. As a 9-time major champion who won tournaments on 6 continents and built a global brand around fitness, international competition, and versatility, Player understands both the American and European perspectives on professional golf. He spent decades competing against the best players from every continent, won in stroke play and match play formats, and knows from direct experience that excellence in one form of competition doesn't automatically transfer to another without proper preparation and mindset adjustment. His criticism carries weight precisely because he's not a partisan figure with tour affiliation or financial incentives to favor one system over another. He's a global ambassador for golf who sees an American institution failing at something it should dominate and refuses to stay silent. The cultural question Player is forcing American golf to confront cuts to the core of national identity and how it manifests in sports. Is American golf too individualistic to win team events consistently? The evidence from multiple decades suggests yes, unless structural changes address the root causes rather than just the symptoms. American sports culture celebrates individual achievement. The scoring champion, the MVP, the superstar who transcends team success. That cultural tendency has produced the most dominant individual golfers in history, from Hogan to Nicklaus to Woods to Scheffler. But it struggles when the format requires subordinating individual glory to collective success, when partnership and chemistry matter more than raw talent, when strategic sacrifice outweighs aggressive scoring. European sports culture, shaped by football leagues where even Messi and Ronaldo must play within team systems, naturally adapts to team golf's demands. Player isn't arguing that American culture needs to fundamentally change. He's arguing that American golf needs to consciously work against its natural individualistic tendencies during the specific weeks when team competition demands it. The institutional question may be even more important. Has the PGA Tour's business model undermined national team success? Player clearly believes the answer is yes, and the evidence supports his position. When you build a system that distributes $560 million based on individual performance, awards the biggest bonuses for season-long individual excellence, and provides zero financial incentive for team success, you shouldn't be surprised when players optimize for individual achievement. When you schedule season-ending events that pay $25 million to the winner, just days before team competition begins, you shouldn't be surprised when players arrive mentally and physically exhausted, more focused on rest than team preparation. When you market individual player brands as the core product and measure success through world rankings and major championship counts rather than collective achievements, you shouldn't be surprised when the culture prioritizes individual legacy over team glory. Player is essentially arguing that the PGA Tour has built a machine designed to produce individual champions and then acts confused when that machine doesn't produce team success. a logical contradiction that can only be resolved through intentional structural changes. The fan debate that players' criticism has ignited centers on a fascinating tension. Do players care more about FedEx Cup playoffs or Ryder Cup glory? The statistical answer is obvious. Players demonstrate through their scheduling, preparation, and visible emotional investment that the FedEx Cup matters more to their careers and financial security. The cultural answer is more complex. American players certainly want to win the Ryder Cup and experience genuine disappointment when they lose, but that disappointment doesn't translate into changing behavior or demanding systematic preparation improvements the way it does for European players. McIlroy openly stated after a European loss in 2016 that he restructured his entire season around being physically and mentally peaked for the next Ryder Cup. No American player has ever made a similar public commitment, at least not one that manifested in visible schedule or preparation changes. That behavioral difference reveals the true hierarchy of priorities more clearly than any public statements about how much the Ryder Cup means. The earnings versus medals comparison provides a final statistical lens on the question player is raising. Scheffler has earned over $90 million in official PGA Tour prize money through the 2024 season. His Ryder Cup record is 2 wins, 5 losses, 1/2, a 40% win rate that would get him benched if points weren't already predetermined. Cantlay has earned over $48 million with a Ryder Cup record of 3 wins, 6 losses, 1/2, a 35% win rate. Contrast that with McIlroy's 62% Ryder Cup win rate despite earning less in European Tour prize money, or Rahm's 50% win rate across limited appearances where he consistently delivered in crucial moments. The American players are wealthier but own worse team golf records. European players have more team golf glory but smaller bank accounts from tour earnings. Player is asking whether American golf is comfortable with that trade-off and whether the system that produces it serves the sport's long-term interests or just serves the short-term financial interests of top players and tour executives. 2 debate questions emerge from players' criticism that will define American golf's direction over the next decade. First, should Ryder Cup performance impact PGA Tour card status, FedEx Cup points, or other tangible career outcomes? Currently, a player can go 0-5 in a Ryder Cup and face 0 professional consequences beyond pride and public criticism. If the Tour integrated team performance into its ranking system, awarding FedEx Cup points for winning team performance or penalizing players who consistently underperform, it would immediately change player incentives and signal that team golf matters institutionally, not just rhetorically. The counter-argument is that the Ryder Cup happens once every 2 years, and punishing players for team outcomes in a sporadic event seems unfair compared to the weekly individual competitions that form the Tour's core product. But fairness isn't the question. Effectiveness is. If the goal is winning Ryder Cups, making team performance consequential to individual careers will change behavior faster than any amount of inspirational speeches or patriotic appeals. The second debate question cuts even deeper. Should LIV players be eligible for Ryder Cup teams if their inclusion makes the team stronger? Current policy says no, based on tour loyalty and membership requirements. Players' position says yes, based on pure competitive logic. Koepka's 5 majors and proven clutch performance would make him one of the most valuable players available for selection. DeChambeau's unique skill set and recent major championship win adds dimensions the current roster lacks. The argument against inclusion centers on rewarding players who left the tour for guaranteed money, suggesting they shouldn't get Ryder Cup participation after abandoning the ecosystem that developed them. The argument for inclusion is simple. If you want to win, you field the best available team regardless of which tour signs their paychecks. Player has consistently sided with the competitive logic, arguing that representing your country in international competition transcends tour politics, and that American golf's institutional pride shouldn't stand in the way of fielding the strongest possible team. Gary Player's criticism of the PGA Tour following this latest Ryder Cup humiliation on American soil has accomplished what previous losses couldn't: forced an honest reckoning with the systematic failures that produce team golf struggles despite unprecedented individual talent. Whether the Tour responds with meaningful structural changes or retreats into defensive posturing about player effort and European excellence, will determine if this loss becomes a turning point or just another disappointing chapter in a decades-long pattern. The financial incentives, schedule structure, and cultural priorities that produce consistent Ryder Cup failure won't change without intentional intervention from tour leadership. Player has done his part by naming the problem publicly and specifically. The question now is whether American golf has the institutional courage to acknowledge he's right and implement the uncomfortable changes necessary to fix it, or whether pride, profit motives, and inertia will continue producing the same disappointing results until Ryder Cup failure becomes accepted as the inevitable price of PGA Tour dominance. The answer will reveal whether American golf truly values team success or simply pays rhetorical tribute to an ideal it's systematically designed to fail at achieving.